Welcome to the first of 4 videos from the Roman Army 2021 lecture on life after war. So we've done combat and met the soldiers and the build-up, and now we're going to look at the immediate impact right after war at the state level all the way down to the individual level. This first video is at the state level and wider social level, and I'm going to look at victories. What happens if the Romans win, and how do they celebrate this? Okay, so victory. I'm going to focus on emperors, okay, and I'm going to just give you a few highlights of some of these things. I'm going to start with Augustus. So Augustus is the first emperor by most accounts. Julius Caesar by some. He actually carried out a wide program of expansion of the empire, which included the pacifying of Spain. Gaul was divided up into smaller chunks. Rhaetia and Noricum, roughly Switzerland, was added earlier on, and then there was more action in North Africa, the Danube, Macedonia, and Greece. Now, there are many, Augustus did many things. Military success became bound up with the emperor, the person of the emperor, so it all essentially goes back to him. Whereas in the Republic, so in Pulo's day, a commander, if he's successful, could have a triumph or some sort of special parade and various other rewards as well. Now it's restricted to the emperor when they happen, these expressions of success and victory, and even the word that would usually get, or the title that would get used for a victorious commander, imperator, gets applied only to the emperor. And of course, that's where our emperor comes from. So Augustus was big at promoting his successes. His propaganda is legendary. There's been lots of work on this, and I'll just give you a sense of some of it here. So some of the means by which he celebrated his victories was through statuary. So here's this, most famous of statues, probably of him, the Prima Porta Augustus. He's wearing militaristic, victorious armor. There's a little Cupid at his feet to give him that religious connection, and you could say divine connection. The reason is it goes back to the founder of the Roman people was Aeneas, and Aeneas was a son of Venus, and one of Venus's other children was Cupid. So there's that little connection there. He put up something called what we call the Res Gestae Divi Augusti. It's the deeds and affairs of the divine Augustus, set up across the empire, but one of the most famous and best preserved ones is in Turkey, and it includes all sorts of great things about celebrating his success. So, for instance, he says, "In the temples of all the cities of the province of Asia, as a victor, I replaced the ornaments which he with whom I fought the war had possessed privately after he despoiled the temples." Later on, "I restored peace to the sea from pirates, and that slave war I handed over to their masters for the infliction of punishments, about 30,000 captured who had fled their masters," etc. And then also, "I extended the borders of all the provinces of the Roman people, which neighbored nations not subject to our rule. I restored peace to the provinces of Gaul and Spain, likewise Germany, which includes the ocean from Cadiz, the river Elba, etc. I added Egypt to the rule of the Roman people," and so on. Now, besides the statues, and there are lots of statues of Augustus, and big bold inscriptions like that one there are also other things like the so-called altar of Augustan peace, which is a famous thing in Rome, and you can read about it. You can see it, and lots of images of it, lots of discussions of it, and you can see it read about it in Virgil and Strabo. Virgil, Roman poet; Strabo, Greco-Roman writer. Now, if we jump ahead a few decades to the 70s CE, so we've talked a little bit about the Jewish War, the big Jewish war fought between Rome and residents of Judea, Jews. Romans won this, pretty violent, lots of death and destruction and slavery. Jerusalem is destroyed, the city is razed to the ground, and there are vivid descriptions given by Josephus in his History of the Jewish War. And you can read it there. Now, in the case of this war, it also provides us with evidence of some of the various means that Rome celebrated victory, slightly different from what we get from Augustus. Okay, so for instance, the most famous outcome, and you could say celebration of Rome's success, came in the form of this most famous of Roman monuments, the Colosseum or Flavian Amphitheater, constructed between 72 and 90 CE, tufa and concrete face with travertine. So this enormous building was constructed using money and goods obtained during that Jewish war. So the spoils of victory were used to pay for this sporting facility. There were also things like victory arches, so the Romans would also often, or Roman emperors would often celebrate victory by means of triumphal arches, big sort of just ceremonial arches over top of the key roads, often in and around Fora in the center of Rome, but we also find them in other places too. So in North Africa, later on, Leptis Magna, and other parts of Italy, there's a few victory arches out there. So one was erected in honor of Roman success in the Jewish war. Okay, the Arch of Titus, completed around 81 CE, Pentelic marble, etc. So it has, you can see, an inscription and all sorts of detailed carvings and more all around it. Now, I mentioned triumphs already, so there were still victorious parades, triumphal parades that took place under the emperors, but again, it was sort of has to be the emperor or someone closely connected to the imperial family to have one of these. And Titus, of course, his father was emperor 69 to 79, but there would have been a triumphal parade, and he would have participated in this. Now, we have both a literary description of this triumph by Josephus, and we also have a visual depiction of this triumph, courtesy of the Arch Titus. So the arch depicts the victorious general's chariot called the Quadriburgia. Now, thanks to Playmobil, I have one here. So it's a chariot. So you imagine the emperor riding in the back. I haven't got a Playmobil emperor. We can put my bearded dude, but he's like, I'm just here to ride. Or maybe my bunny. The bunny is the emperor. Here we go. Look at me, or the victorious general. And the key part quad is the 4 horses, and you can see that here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's the little. It's all gone wrong. The little transportation vehicle. Okay, now in the there are other depictions of the triumph. So the chariot and the horses is the key part connected to the victorious general. But also you'd also parade conquered enemies. There might be paintings and pictures of places conquered. I'll give you some literary examples in a second. And in the case of this war, we also have fancy goods from the Roman perspective that were taken from Israel and brought to Rome, like the menorah you can see there, and you can sort of make out a bit of the arch in the distance. There's some chronology problems there, but that doesn't matter for our purposes. So here is a couple of things just to say about this. Josephus' account, he says, now it is impossible to describe his description, or part of it, of the triumph. It is possible to describe the multitude of the shows as they deserve, and the magnificence of them all, such indeed as a man could not easily think of as performed, either by the labor of workmen, or the variety of riches, or the rarities of nature, for almost all such curiosities as the most happy men ever get by piecemeal were here one heaped on another, and those both admirable and costly in their nature, and brought together on that day, demonstrated the vastness of the Roman dominions, etc. Then he goes on to include other things, again, about the menorah. But for those that were taken in the temple of Jerusalem, they made the greatest figure of them all. That is the golden table of the weight of many talents, the candlestick, the menorah, also that was made of gold, though its construction were now changed from that which we made use of. For its middle shaft was fixed upon a basis, and the small branches were produced out of it to a great length, etc. Okay, now I said we also get an interesting account, not of the same triumph, but of a triumphs in general from Ovid. So he's writing around about the time of Augustus. He wrote lots of things, various poetry, including this, the Ars Amatoria, sort of art of love, how to meet women, etc. And one of the places he says you can do this is to go to a triumphal parade and act like you know what you're talking about. So BS your way through it. And it's a lot of, interesting insight into the patriarchal nature of Roman society and Ovid, etc. But also, the day-to-day stuff provides us some insight into triumph. So here's this triumph taking place, and he says, all about Parthians and how great they are, and then drawn by white horses shalt in triumph ride, with conquered slaves attending on thy side, slaves that no longer can be safe in flight, O glorious object, O surprising night, O day of public joy, too good to end in night. On such a day, if thou and next to thee some beauty sits the spectacle to see, if she inquires the names of conquered kings, of mountains, rivers, and hidden springs, answer to all thou knowest, and if need be, of things unknown seem to speak knowingly, etc. And there's other things. Okay. So a number of emperors celebrate triumphs, okay, and they also accumulate victorious titles. So after him, Augustus again changes things. After him, the emperor had the right to a triumph, and he also accumulated these acclamations, these titles you get for being victorious. Augustus had 21 of them. Claudius had 22. Domitian had 27. Domitian 22. And we really see victory being used as a means of promoting an emperor's success. And even if they're not terribly successful, they still might promote their success. And imperator comes to mean emperor. Okay. Now, there are some of the victory titles that we find emperors using are things like Caligula gives himself the title Germanicus for victory over the Germans. Some are a little more honest, like Trajan gets the name Germanicus, Dacicus, and Parthicus in response to his successes against Dacians, Parthians, etc. Marcus Aurelius, Arminiacus, Parthicus, Maximus, Medicus, Germanicus, Germanicus. So those are all connected to the wars fought in his reign against the Parthians and Marcomannian Quadi, etc. And, sometimes you can see all these titles accumulated in documents, like a military diploma, which we've talked about. So here's one, for instance, just one little bit that reads, the Emperor Caesar Domitian, son of the divine Vespasian, Augustus Germanicus, Pontifex Maximus, tribunician power for the 13th time, imperator 22 times, consul for the 16th time, permanent censor, father of the fatherlands. There you get all these fancy titles. Now this continued for a long time. Septimius Everest, who's now 200 years after Augustus, also did this. There's a big victory arch of Septimius Everest in Rome, and you can see it here. It's got a big inscription. It's got some parades and combat and all sorts of other things. It's also got 3 bays under which you can pass. They've got scenes with him addressing his troops, so lots going on there. And as I said, there's also a different victory arch off in Leptis Magna, which is in North Africa. So Septimius Everest was from North Africa, roughly, I believe, modern Algeria, which is, I think, where this is. Could also be Tunisia. Anyway, so four entrances. Forget the technical name. Anyway, of that arch you can see there. And here is another image of a triumphal procession, not unlike the one with Josephus, but this is 150 years later, 140-ish, and some stylistic differences, how they do the folds, and the faces are more outward and projecting, looking at you, and anyway. But you get the 4-horse chariot, the quadriborgia, which you can see here. Okay, now continued into late antiquity, and I think I'm finishing with Constantine the Great. Okay, he's the big conversion guy. There's the giant statue. We have some monuments to his splendor. Okay, he had a big arch, not unlike the one of Septimius Everest. His is interesting for lots of reasons, because for one thing, it's both a brand new monument, but it also reused materials from earlier monuments. So like we have all these statues of Dacians, so far as we know, from earlier monuments, Trajan and Hadrian, which are found at the top. Okay, so reusing earlier ones. There's contemporary sculptures, as you see here, but there's other things you can see up here. I'm sort of highlighting with the cursor that are from earlier monuments. And also, it has the big inscription, but this arch celebrated success against the Romans. The other ones, you celebrate victory against non-Romans, barbarians. Here, he's celebrating victory against Romans, which is a little sketchier. Okay. Anyway, so that's gives you some sense of the various ways that emperors celebrated victory, and the Romans, as hopefully you get some sense of just how keen they were to do this in a variety of ways.